I'm not exaggerating. There were hundreds of sightings involving tens of thousands of witnesses. I have on my desk next to me a box of UFO reports from 1909. It was a massive event.
Hang on, we're getting you back on and in studio to talk about these thousands of sightings in the early 1900s in New Zealand, possibly of German Zeppelins. That I have never, ever heard, Eli.
I've never heard of that, but I got to say, I think I'm the sort of person who would be susceptible. Even the discussion we're having now, I'm thinking I'm probably going to see a UFO tonight. Let's put it in my head. I'm going to look up to the stars. I'm going to be calling in an official report, so stay tuned.
Do you feel that you have that susceptibility? Is your mind open enough?
I think so, and I have. I think in Paihia I was there once and I looked up and saw something wild, and then the next day someone said it was a drone, but I'm sticking to UFOs.
Very good, Dr. Bartholomew. Would you mind actually coming in one day and unpacking for us those historic sightings in the early 1900s?
Yeah, can I also mention that during the 1880s and 1890s, there were many sightings, of giant crocodiles in the Waikato River. That is absolutely true. And the speculation is that it was possibly seals back to back. But if you look up on papers past, you'll see dozens of reports from that period.
My goodness me, that is something else. Dr. Bartholomew there. Let's go out with a little bit of Hotel California. Julia Hartley-Moore, Eli Matthewson. Nice to have you on the panel. Fantastic stuff. I'm Wallace Chapman. Thanks to my producer Charlie Drever. Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. I'm back tomorrow, Thursday, 3:45. See you then.
Welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, the twists and turns of Cyclone Gabrielle keep coming. A pub turned information centre, the school a general store. People cleaning homes they may never live in again but are still paying mortgages on. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank ramps up interest rates. We're live with reaction. Thousands of inter-islander ferry passengers could be waiting days for a crossing after yet another breakdown. The boss is here for a Please Explain. Is Ports of Auckland's profit enough to keep its number one critic, Mayor Wayne Brown, happy? Well, we asked the CEO. And the first day of the massive Te Matatini National Kapahaka Festival gets underway. You can watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Finance Minister says the Reserve Bank is working to curb the scourge that is inflation on low and middle income earners. The central bank has raised the official cash rate by 50 basis points to 4.75%, saying it needs to continue the battle against inflation. It's in line with expectations, despite suggestions it should suspend or scale back the rise because of the recent cyclone and flooding. Grant Robertson says the central bank is doing its job.
They have a mandate to bring inflation down to between 1% and 3%. Inflation is well above that at this time. Inflation is a scourge, particularly for low and middle income earners, and so that is their job to do that.
Today's OCR rise was expected as the central bank grapples with inflation, which has settled at a 32-year high of 7.2% and shown few signs of falling. The number of people unaccounted for following Cyclone Gabrielle has more than halved. Police say as of midday, the number of uncontactable people sits at 346. Overnight, it was 800. The police have deployed 4 specialist victim recovery dog teams to the Eastern District to help find missing people. Victim recovery dogs are regular police patrol dogs, which have additional search skills. Hundreds of people turned out today to farewell the volunteer firefighter who died in a slip at Muriwai during Cyclone Gabrielle. Dave Van Swanenberg was killed and his colleague Craig Stevens died later in hospital. Dave's wife, Amy, says her husband didn't like drama and would have been shocked to find himself the focus of so much attention.
You've become a focal point of the extensive tragedy that so many experienced in various horrendous ways beginning on the 13th of February. And as such, I know you would selflessly want to help your community support each other and grieve, despite typically being a private man.
A service is expected to be held for Craig Stevens next week. A team of willing washers in Gisborne have put more than 50 loads of clothing through their tank supply washing machines to help those flooded in Cyclone Gabrielle amidst a water crisis. Tairāwhiti Civil Defence says reticulated water will be rationed for at least another 5 days while a broken pipe is fixed. Today, 6 large bags of clothing, washed and ready to wear, were returned to Raipuia Brightwell, whose house is yellow stickered.
In a time of water restriction, it was really hard. You're trying to make the most of the water you had. So when people volunteered to take away some of the clothes, the relief.
Raipuia Brightwell says it's been a load off her shoulders. Kiwi Rail expects it'll take 3 to 4 days to clear the backlog of more than 2,000 passengers affected by cancellations this week. The General Manager of the Inter-Islander, Walter Rushbrook, says the fault on the Kaiarahi picked up on Monday has now been fixed. He says the company's focused on keeping its fleet running safely and reliably with regular checks and maintenance until it takes ownership of 2 new vessels in 2025.
They are getting old. Which is why we're getting new ones, but we're investing heavily through all those things that I mentioned before to make sure that we can keep them going until the new ships arrive.
Walter Rushbrook says the Inter-Islander is putting on extra sailings to clear the backlog of passengers, and those who can't be accommodated will be refunded. Health officials are urgently trying to contact a group of people who may have been exposed to measles on a plane. A person on Qantas flight QF42 from Jakarta on February the 15th has the disease in Australia. About 35 people from that flight travelled on to New Zealand. Te Whatu Ora has so far contacted 6 of them and is urging anyone else to phone Healthline. Public Health Clinical Lead William Ranger says the passengers could be anywhere around the country by now.
It's possible they could be incubating and becoming infectious around about now. That's why it's critical that anyone who has travelled on gets in touch with Healthline.
To sport now, and All Blacks coach Ian Foster concedes it's highly unlikely he'll be in the job after the World Cup. Foster's told Newstalk ZB that New Zealand Rugby's decision to appoint the next coach before the tournament has become a distraction for the team. An announcement around the timing of the appointment of the next All Blacks coach is expected in the near future, with Crusaders coach Scott Robertson and Japan coach Jamie Joseph the leading candidates to replace Foster. Foster says, reading the tea leaves, there's a mood for change.
This is becoming more of a debate about who's going to apply than what's the right thing for the team. And I think it's pretty highly unlikely that I will be in this job next year. But you keep getting asked about it, well, am I going to apply? And I kind of think, well, that's not really the big question for me. The big question is what's the best thing for the All Blacks in 2023.
The Black Caps are in danger of losing their first home test series in 6 years, but all-rounder Daryl Mitchell insists they won't be changing their game plan. England crushed New Zealand by 267 runs in the first test in Tauranga, and coach Gary Stead concedes their confidence is down, but Mitchell maintains they can level things up come Friday's second test in Wellington.
For us, it's sticking true to who we are as Kiwis and Black Caps and what's worked for us for a number of years now. We're missing a couple of small moments at the moment, which is disappointing, but we also know that, we're not too far away.
And in football, holders Real Madrid have thrashed Liverpool 5-2 in the first leg of their last 16 tie in football's Champions League. That's the news.
Moving mountains of toxic silt.
This is a massive event. We've got 3 to 4 metres of silt through our orchards. It's not going to be resolved in a week or so.
And with forecasts of more rain.
Any sort of rain is going to cause problems. We all have the silt that's all there, the debris. So we have to keep a very close eye on the rainfall.
National reins in its climate denier.
Her and I had a conversation and we talked about it, and she understands the National Party position, which has been our position for a long time.
Working the angles. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland south to Taranaki, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Isolated showers, possibly heavy south of Auckland this afternoon, becoming widespread for a time tomorrow. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers, then rain developing tomorrow, heavy falls possible. Whanganui and from Taihape to Wellington, isolated showers, turning to rain today before easing or clearing tomorrow. Looking at Te Waipounamu, Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, excluding the Kaikoura coast. A few showers, turning to rain this afternoon with possible thunderstorms in Nelson. Fine tomorrow apart from isolated showers. For the Kaikoura coast and for Canterbury, periods of rain with heavy falls, mainly inland. Westland, rain heavy at times, easing this afternoon, then clearing, fine tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, fine about the fjords. Showers elsewhere, becoming frequent tomorrow morning, then easing or clearing tomorrow evening. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, isolated showers, becoming rain tomorrow. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I will have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Cyclone Gabrielle's turned life upside down. In the Hawke's Bay settlement of Puketapu, the school's a general store of donated items and the local pub, while it's an information centre with beer on the side. Further up the island, everyday routines like showering are now luxuries. People are cleaning houses they can't live in, but they're still paying mortgages for. Despite all of that, the Reserve Bank today raised the official cash rate, the cost of borrowing money, by 0.5%. We'll have more on that shortly. But we begin today in Puketapu, a tiny settlement alive with sounds of diggers scraping silt, people dragging flood-damaged items from their homes, and the buzz of a community in clean-up mode. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
This is the easiest way of transport around the village.
Puketapu resident Ollie Midgley's getting around by bike at the moment, and this morning he guided Checkpoint through his property.
The piles have moved and a couple of bearers have broken, so there's a bit of work to do to get that right. So we've still got the lake on our fence line. The top tide line was about here, top tide line was up at the gate originally.
So normally there's no water there, that's grass?
No, not at all. No, that's grazing for sheep. But we call that Hyde Park. It's just such a lovely vista through there. So that's a 100-year-old villa that came originally over the hill from Taradale, was put here about 25 years ago. And originally it was put up on 2-metre piles.
Out the back, all sorts of items are drying in the sun as he works to salvage what he can. Mr. Midgley and his wife were taken to safety by neighbours in a kayak, having thought about using a wine barrel as a flotation device.
It was about 8 foot deep inside the house. And so that's our bedroom. The ensuite is actually slightly lower level. And I first discovered water seeping up, little brown spots growing up through the floorboards, like an amoeba.
He says, half jokingly, that he sees forecast rain as a rinse cycle for his mud-covered possessions.
Yes, there's a bit of stuff we saved. So we'll be right. We're fine. We're fine. There's a lot of people a lot worse off than we are.
Some of those people lived down nearby Dartmoor Road, where houses were washed away and residents clung to roofs waiting for rescue. The water was powerful enough to blow out local bridges. For those in need, the Puketapu School Hall has transformed.
Puketapu School Hall has turned into a general store of sorts. There's dozens of volunteers here and dozens of people getting essentials, such as tinned food. I can see tinned fruit, crisps, veggie crisps, gluten-free bread. There's rows of shoes, other footwear, gumboots and clothing. And given the devastation of what we've seen after last week's cyclone, there's no telling how long the store will have to stay open.
Mindy Windross is among the volunteers at the hall.
The first couple of days it was undies, socks and a change of clothes. We're just like that. I had a guy in tears because we were able to give him socks and gumboots for the first time after 3 days of walking in bare feet through mud and whatever else is out there, and just to give him some fresh gumboots was just huge. The locals were using the school pool to shower in because, as you see, if you drive around there's so much dust and it's so fine that it just plumes everywhere and you're covered in it. So they'd come in and take a shower, but of course with no power, the pool's turning green, it's turning a bit brown now, so we knew that we needed to do something, so we just got some locals. They came in and built some seriously good showers so that the locals could come anytime and just shower here.
For most of the past week, community efforts have kept going despite the loss of power, water and communications.
I keep saying to them, I was like, I'm at confectionery for a living. Like, we're just mums. Like, I don't know how we got these jackets. I don't know how we, got in charge, but we're here and we're doing it, and these people need it, so we'll be here.
Mary Danielson, who owns the pub, the Puki Tapu, has flung open her doors.
We've got lawyers, we've got insurance people, we've got MSD helping people with all of their, with their money problems or their insurance problems, so people just drop in, and it's fantastic because there's a lot of people here that don't, have no access to computers or anything like that.
She says residents have been manning roadblocks overnight.
They're to stop all the looters coming in, which was starting to happen. There's a fantastic roadblocks up Puketitri that other people are organising, and then we're doing the one down the road here. And so there's 4 to 6 people on it at the same time, and there's a big truck in the middle of the road, and they're stopping people from coming through unless you have a residence card.
Farmers Phil and Louise Alexander are also in clean-up mode. Their 600-hectare property has slips along fence lines. They've got stock that isn't theirs in their paddocks, and the floodwaters dumped a container on a shed.
We've got a big lake out the back there that caused by the river. The river broached its banks and came right across here behind that hill down there, and so there's huge flooding behind here as well. But we haven't lost our house and didn't lose any family members, so we're blessed.
Checkpoint met several people from outside the district who have come in to help, like Steve Orchard from Onekawa.
We're just helping out the Puketip community to get rid of all their rubbish. There are some trucks turning up today, and we're going to start moving all the rubbish away from, as you can see, all down there. And it's just a matter of waiting for trucks to turn up so we can start loading all the stuff away. Give them get rid of a bit of the stink and get a bit of the rubbish out the way.
Puki Tapu residents face a massive clean-up, but every little bit helps as they look to rebuild their lives.
It is 14 minutes after 5. If you're listening to that piece from Jimmy and Nick on radio, we'll put the video version on our webpage. Kia mau tonu mai, stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. You are irreplaceable. The words of the widow of a volunteer firefighter who lost his life trying to help others as Cyclone Gabrielle was bearing down. Dave Van Swanenberg was found dead after a landslide came down on the home he was helping people evacuate from in Muriwai on Auckland's west coast. Today, hundreds of family and friends paid tribute to the veterinarian, husband, father and friend. Our reporter Finn Blackwell and camera operator Marika Habazi were there.
Car after car pulled up to Parihoa Farm to pay their respects. A community in mourning, bonded by grief. Hundreds gathered in Muriwai today to celebrate the life of Dave Van Swanenberg. His wife, Amy, told mourners her husband didn't like drama and would have been shocked to find himself the focus of so much attention.
And as such, I know you would selflessly want to help your community support each other and grieve, despite typically being a private man. So we have gathered here not only to mourn you, my incredible husband, but also hold each other in the wake of learning how to live in the face of our battle-scarred little town with our lives turned upside down.
He and fellow fireman Craig Stevens were attending a call-out on the 13th of February during Cyclone Gabrielle. He was trapped in the house after another property collapsed on top of it. Craig Stevens suffered critical injuries in the tragedy and later died in hospital. Today, a horse-led procession went from the Muriwai Fire Station to the farm service. Chairman of the United Fire Brigades Association, Peter Dunn, was in attendance.
It reinforces the dedication and commitment that community volunteers like him have demonstrated, and I guess it will inspire future firefighters to honour his memory, and that's appropriate.
Residents also came to pay their respects for the man who gave his life helping others.
He just was always ready to take a phone call, to just sort of, help out, to drop by, to, answer any questions without sort of, no way dismissive, just, he just always knew the answer, really.
Everybody liked him, and he was knowledgeable, He
looked after our horses, and he would stop off at our house and have a cup of tea sometimes.
The Chief Fire Officer of the Muriwai Volunteer Fire Brigade, Fallon Perry, says Dave was a natural and talented leader who was rapidly rising through their ranks. A few weeks ago, he was promoted to Station Officer.
Last Monday was his first incident as an officer in his new red helmet. Dave, you will be sorely missed. Firefighter, vet, aviator, father, husband, and we will miss the time we have had together.
The service for Craig Stevens is expected to be held next week. Till then, residents here in Muruai will be reflecting on the life of a pillar of their community and a trusted friend.
And the video version of that story will be on our webpage. It could be days before stranded passengers bumped from inter-islander sailings are rebooked for crossings after a ferry breakdown, with priority being given to cyclone aid. Its Kairahi ferry was taken out after an engineering problem on Monday, leaving people stuck either side of Cook Strait. To make things worse, right now the Kaitaki is only delivering freight after it lost power and got stranded at sea last month. Executive General Manager Inter-Islander Walter Rushbrook concedes the ships are old and they've had problems.
The situation's on the improve, so with Kairahi, which has been out of service for the last couple of days, it's back in service shortly with both freight and passengers. We've got Aratiri on the run and Kaitaki's running a freight service currently.
Yeah, but what's gone wrong? Are you doing proper maintenance? Because obviously you've had a few breakdowns.
Yeah, so with the Kairahi, the issue that we've just had is that we continuously monitor the performance of the ship. We picked up an issue in the heat exchanger in the funnel, and we decided to pull it from the ship, to pull it from service until it was fixed. This has taken a little bit of time because we had to wait for the funnel to cool down. But once we could get into it, we've undertaken the work, and it's been tested and included class approval, and we're back in business.
Yeah, but Walter, why has this happened in the first place? Are you doing preventive work? Should you caught up on this earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we are getting new ships in 2025, so we're looking forward to them. But in the meantime, we're really focused on running our ships safely and reliably. I can assure people that we do have maintenance and inspection processes. The ships have redundant systems, so if something goes wrong, then there's backups. We've got highly trained crew. We're monitoring, as I mentioned before, about the Kairahi, and so we pick things up and take action quickly. And we do have scheduled maintenance periods. So each ship has a time off each week. And as we get through into the winter season, our ships will have longer periods off, including wet docks and dry docks. And the Kairahi, for example, is going to dry dock later this year.
So are they just too old? Are they just too old, Walter?
Look, we need to keep them going until the new ships arrive. I can assure people that we're putting a lot of investment into maintenance and processes.
But bottom line, Walter, are they too old?
If we go through all those processes that I talked about, I'm confident we can keep the ships going. They are getting old, which is why we're getting new ones, but we're investing heavily through all those things that I mentioned before to make sure that we can keep them going until the new ships arrive.
How many passengers and cars were bumped due to the latest breakdown?
It was about 1,200 people today, so yeah, probably double that for 2 days of outage. So yeah, on that, I really apologise for the disruptions. It's not just missing the ferry, but it's all their onward connections and other activities they had planned. But we're working very, very hard behind the scenes to make sure that we rebook people as quickly as possible.
How many have you rebooked, and how long are they going to have to wait to get a crossing?
Oh, look, I haven't got that exact data, but what I can say is that we're working super hard, our bookings and customer teams, to make sure that we clear the backlog as quickly as possible. The other thing that I'll just let you be aware of is obviously there's emergency supplies coming up from the South Island. So we're making sure that we give that priority treatment, particularly power equipment, communications gear, and other such things. So we're managing that closely with the National Emergency Management Centre.
So Walter, just to be 100% on this, you are absolutely rebooking everyone who wants to be rebooked, who missed out on a crossing due to this problem.
Yes, we will rebook everyone. We're already heavily booked, so we've got limited space, so we're sort of cut and shuffling bookings, so we're not immediately able to rebook people, but we're working to clear the backlog as quickly as possible.
So how long is the wait potentially for some people, Walter?
Going from previous disruptions, it can take 3 to 4 days or more, depending on the nature of the disruption.
What compensation are you going to give them for that then?
So people who get a cancelled booking, we give them a full refund.
And that's Executive General Manager Inter-Islander Walter Rushbrook there. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Are you one of those people who's waiting for a Cook Strait crossing as a consequence of some of those problems with the ferries? How long have you been told you'll have to wait? Do let us know. And we're also keen to hear how the clean-up is going if you are in one of the areas hit hard by the cyclone. And what do you need? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the Reserve Bank is working to curb the scourge of inflation. In line with expectations, the central bank today raised the official cash rate by 50 basis points to 4.75%. Inflation has been running hot at over 7%, with Cyclone Gabrielle and the floods in Auckland set to create more pressure. The number of people unaccounted for after the cyclone has dropped to 346, down from 800 overnight. Over the last 24 hours, officers in the Eastern District have arrested 19 people who have been charged with 32 different offences, primarily relating to shoplifting, assault and family harm. Hundreds of people have farewelled volunteer firefighter Dave van Svanenberg, who died in a slip at Muriwai on Auckland's west coast during Cyclone Gabrielle. Dave's widow, Amy, says the family man, a vet, would have been shocked to find himself the focus of so much attention. A service for Craig Stevens, who was also in the February 13 slip and who died in hospital, is expected next week. The Ministry of Social Development has handed out just over $20 million of civil defence payments to nearly 35,000 people affected by flooding in Auckland. And Kiwi Rail says it'll take 3 to 4 days to clear the backlog of more than 2,000 Inter-Islander passengers hit by cancellations this week. The General Manager of the Inter-Islander, Walter Rushbrook, told Checkpoint the fault on the Kaiarahi ferry picked up on Monday has been fixed. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, a serious crash in Northland at Tamatirau on Whangarei Heads Road has closed the road and it's likely to remain closed for some time. In Auckland, due to a breakdown, the right lane is partially blocked on State Highway 1 southbound past Mount Wellington Highway off-ramp, and State Highway 2 has reopened to one lane between the Whatatutu intersection and Matawai Township. That's the Gisborne to Opotiki Road. That will be open from 7am to 7pm daily. Our next news headlines and any traffic news will be at about 40 minutes past 5.
Ngā mihi Evie, the saga surrounding the All Blacks coaching appointment process has taken yet another twist. With New Zealand Rugby still yet to confirm when or how it will be done, head coach Ian Foster has decided to go public with his views. Well, joining me now is sports reporter Clay Wilson. OK, what's going on? All the twists and turns. New Zealand Rugby's not really shining any light on it. So what's Ian Foster up to and what's he saying?
Yeah, so this was a bit of a surprise when this came out late last night and then again this morning, because it's not normal for people within the All Blacks environment, especially the head coach, to come out and speak on a topic like this so publicly and individually. And we don't know if New Zealand Rugby knew that he was going to do this, but I would say it's doubtful that they wanted him to come out and talk about this particular topic. And this is, of course, about the All Blacks coaching appointment process, who's going to coach the team beyond the World Cup in France this year. All signs have been and are still pointing to the fact that New Zealand Rugby are going to do this early, are going to run a process, appoint a new coach before this year's World Cup. So in this interview that Ian Foster did with both the Herald and Newstalk ZB, he confirmed that is what New Zealand Rugby are planning and that he's not a fan of it. He's essentially wanted to speak out against this move to run this early process. He used words like concerned, frustrated, and his reasoning for that is that he believes there's been a lot of talk about the distraction this will cause on the team leading up to a World Cup if they appoint a new coach, which most likely won't be him. And that's what he's speaking up for. He says it's going to be unsettling for the team and not what's best for them. He thinks the focus has been perhaps on who's going to be the next coach and what suits them best, that kind of thing. Obviously, we've seen a lot of news around Scott Robertson in this kind of domain. Now, he insists this isn't about what's best for him. He's doing this because not only himself, but the team and the management, a big management staff, are all working to try and win this World Cup, and they don't need all these distractions going on. As for his particular future in the job, very candid about this as well. This has been a topic as part of this whole situation. He says he knows it's unlikely he's going to keep the job, that he's read the tea leaves and that there's a mood for change within the environment, that they wanted a different coach. But he's not actually ruling out reapplying, but he said he would only reapply probably if they decided to change their tune and move the process back to after the World Cup. And of course the All Blacks would need to do well, obviously, if he was going to consider to reapply as well. So plenty going on here.
It's so messy, Clay. It doesn't need to be this messy. I mean, what responsibility does New Zealand rugby need to take for the complete mess that is now playing out in public?
Well, the problem is we haven't heard a lot from New Zealand rugby. We've had one-line statements or just nothing from them at all. So when are we going to hear from them? I don't know. We don't know at this point. They said a statement wasn't and a decision wasn't imminent. I think the only things really that are for sure is that not everyone's going to agree whichever way they go, and whatever happens, the All Blacks are still trying to win a World Cup, and Ian Foster and New Zealand Rugby clearly aren't quite seeing eye to eye. They're going to need to get back on the same page somewhat if the team's going to have any chance in France at this tournament.
Interesting. Okay, Cyclone Gabrielle, well, it has touched many New Zealanders and it's having a personal impact on a couple of our Black Caps cricketers.
Yeah, of course, it's affected so many people, and a couple of players within the Black Caps Test squad, Blair Tickner and Will Young, both from the Hawke's Bay region. So they were released after the first Test against England to go back to the Hawke's Bay to see their families, but also to try and help out. So Blair Tickner, his father has a farm just south of Napier, and he said basically the house was fully destroyed. So pretty hard for to go back and as it is for a lot of people to see that kind of damage. He said his dad actually has a hire business, so they were employed. The cricketers were employed on the forklifts, the tractors. I think we have some photos here of his dad's farm, but also of him on the tractor. And then also he said he got his dad's tractor stuck in the mud. And there's a great photo he said his dad didn't know, so maybe he's finding out now that his tractor's stuck in the mud, and that's in his neighbour's yard, apparently.
We'll put them on our webpage so people can check them out too,
But
Clay.
he did get really emotional, understandably, talking about this, and he also talked about how, while the Black Caps had a tough time on the field, that it puts it into perspective, basically, what's going on in a cricket field. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel hard when you see stock on the side of the road dead, and you see people crying, grown men crying about their homes and their whole life's been flipped upside down. So yeah, cricket to me is obviously my life as well, but it's nothing compared to what people are going through at the moment.
Yeah, really understandable sentiments from Blair Tickner there. Now, New Zealand Cricket have announced that they're going to run a fundraising match. Obviously, a lot of efforts going in from a lot of people, whether it's money, time, clothes, food, all these kinds of things. But they're playing Sri Lanka in a one-day here in Auckland at the end of next month. Now, ANZ, their major sponsor, have already donated $1 million to get this fundraising match kick-started. They're also going to put all the ticket proceeds from this match towards that fundraising effort, and they're going to have some public donations available on the day as well. So all contributing, like a lot of people are, to this effort to try and help these regions recover after the
So you
the
get
floods.
to watch a match and the price you pay for the ticket goes to a good cause.
Exactly.
Thank you, Clay. That is Clay Wilson there with our sports news. Children around Napier have returned to school today for the first time since Cyclone Gabrielle struck just over a week ago. Far from a return to normality, it at least provided children and their caregivers a return to some routine. Our reporters Timothy Brown and Jordan Dunn went along to Marewa School.
Waiata ringing out from school halls and kids catching up with their mates. Marewa School Principal Chris Maynell says it's exactly what the children need.
So that's fantastic to see. The kids are really happy to be back, and it's been pretty stressful for everybody. So the kids need each other, they need those relationships, they need their friends and they need their teachers.
Chris Maynell says some whānau have been deeply affected by the cyclone, and as a result, only about 80% of the school's 200 tamariki have returned today.
People have had mixed experiences. Some people have been heavily impacted, lost everything. Other people not so much. It's just been the difficulties of living without power and in a a tense environment, lots of stress for whānau as well. So, yeah, lots of stories. We haven't got everybody back yet, but we'll do some welfare checks today to find those people and help out the best we can.
And while it's a big deal to be back at school, for some, like 5-year-old Nicholas Ball, it's an even bigger deal. Is this your first day at school? Yeah. How do you feel about your first day at school?
Big kid school.
Big kid school? You happy? You excited?
Yeah.
His parents, Jack and Marisha, say it wasn't the start to his schooling adventure that they expected, but it's great to be able to give him some sense of normality.
We only got power on a couple of days ago after 6 days. We ran out of gas with our barbecue, so we had to make a outside fire pit with our barbecue tray. After getting the power on, the Wi-Fi, and the kids got a little bit of a taste of it, but finally having the day back at school, it's great. They get to see their friends do things, and yeah.
Hawke's Bay Primary Principals Association President, Flaxmere Primary School Tumuaki Robin Isaacson, says most schools in Hastings returned on Monday, with Napier schools following today. However, there's a mixed picture across the region, with some principals still unable to access their schools.
There's definitely a concerted effort to get children back to school, but I think there's also a realism that for every school it's individual, and there's a lot of the impact of the cyclone out there that we haven't seen on the roads yet. I mean, there's been a focus around Napier and Hastings, but I feel for our rural schools that the principals aren't even aware. We just know roads are closed, so again, it varies on what the destruction is out there, because it is literally destruction.
But for those children who have returned, just like those around the region, there's a smile on their face despite what they've been through. It's clear just how much being back means to them.
It's been exciting because you've gathered up with all your friends, to see your friends,
So you love school?
Yeah, I love school.
It means fun to me, a happy place for me too.
And as the slow slog back to normality continues in Hawke's Bay, getting back to those happy places is important for everyone.
Utterly awesome to hear a kid say they love school, and first day at Big Kids School too. Pretty cool. It is 27 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time to go to business news. Ko taku hoa ina ko Nona Peltier is in the studio to talk business. Okay, the big news of the day. Reserve Bank has raised the official cash rate. What's the deal and what's the reaction?
Yeah, so it's a 0.5%. A percentage point, I should say. That's 50 basis point increase. Some people in the market were thinking that the Reserve Bank should just leave it alone. Others thought maybe 0.25%. Some thought, 0.75% might be in line. But the Reserve Bank said those numbers were never the 0 and the 2.5 basis points were never a consideration. It was always going to be between 50 and 75 basis points. They went for 50. And the market reaction was interesting. The dollar, the Kiwi, surged just after that announcement. Now, you might think, why would it do that? But that's because even though most forecasters were expecting 0.5%, they weren't expecting the Reserve Bank to continue to raise the official cash rate to its forecast of 5.5%. Thought that maybe that might moderate with inflation in the fourth quarter, less than what the Reserve Bank was anticipating. But no, that wasn't going to be the case because the Reserve Bank governor said the labor market remains tight. Inflation is way too high and something, needs to be done to bring it back down. So what we're looking at is high official cash rate numbers for some time. 5.5% is still on the cards for the middle of this year and then remaining high right up until 2025 and into that year, probably to March 2026. That's when we're going to see it back around 4%. So interest rates will remain high for a long time. That did surprise the market. So we saw the New Zealand dollar, surge, but then at the end, it just was up slightly, which is surprising, actually, because it was down previously. And the reason why is because we're going to hear from the U.S. Federal Reserve some minutes of their meetings to see where they're seeing their interest rate going. So we're at 62.3 U.S. cents, 91.1 Australian and 51.4 British pence. The New Zealand top 50 index ended down just 7 points. Now that's quite good, relatively speaking. Asia was certainly a sea of red. The Reuters report from the Wall Street markets, their word was thump, meaning the sound of global markets tumbling, with Wall Street posting its worst day of the year. So that we were only down 7 points, I got to say, sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And that was to 11,794. So there you go.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier with Business News. Now, let's get more on the Reserve Bank's decision. Joining us now is Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr. Jared, was this the right thing to do? 0.5 percentage point.
Yeah, look, it's unrelenting. This is a central bank that's pretty keen on getting on top of inflation, which is fair enough. But from our perspective, I think they could have paused today and come back in April once we have a better handle on what's happening with this cyclone rebuild.
So did you think it was too aggressive?
Yes, I do. Their track is very aggressive. They've got a continued rate rises to 5.5%, so another 75 basis points to come. We think the cash rate should peak around current levels or 5%.
Okay, so what role is Cyclone Gabrielle playing in the inflation fire?
It's playing an awkward role. We're likely to see a spike in inflation, particularly given the crops that have been lost, but then associated with the rebuild as well. We're operating at full capacity in construction, so we're likely to see even more wage pressure, and I'm worried we're going to see a shortage of materials as well. But that said, policymakers should look through the impacts of natural disasters like this. So we should be looking through that spike in inflation, not hiking interest rates on the back of it.
In the short term, what is going to get more expensive, please?
Well, there could be a number of things. The Reserve Bank highlighted, as people replace damaged goods like used cars, carpet, appliances, these sorts of things, there may be a bit of a spike in price there. Obviously, food is a big one and one that's concerning us, given the Hawke's Bay as a food bowl for us. We're likely to see spikes there. And then we're likely to see a bit more generalised inflation, particularly around rebuilding housing. So the construction sector will generate continued inflation.
Well, that's a grim list, but you paused there on food, saying it's causing you particular concern. What are your expectations there?
Well, what worries me is that we're not just losing a year's worth of fruit or anything like that. The trees are damaged, right? And what we're hearing from our sources in the Hawke's Bay is that a lot of these things will effectively be written off, and these trees take years to develop. Particularly, in the wine region. So the getting back to where we were could take a long period of time.
Yeah, well, those are people's jobs as well. They employ a lot of people, pickers, packers, everything, right? Freighting, truck drivers, lots of knock-on effects for employment. Now, small businesses working in these cyclone-affected areas are really crying out for some help from the government, and they want a wage subsidy. Can the government afford that? Would it be the right thing to do?
Yes, the government can afford it, absolutely. We have very, very low levels of government debt. So should we want to do packages like this, should we want to put billions of dollars into the rebuild, we can definitely afford it. And then look after that debt with a more efficient economy down the track. So absolutely, we can afford it. Should they do it, which is the exact thing that they should do? There are a variety of measures. If businesses are screaming out for a wage subsidy, then absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. That is Jared Kerr, Kiwi Bank Chief Economist there. Now, Air New Zealand has just announced a temporary service between Gisborne and Napier. The flights will operate Sunday to Friday and go on sale tomorrow. They are available for travel from 26 February to 25th March. The flight will leave Napier at 7:30am and leave Gisborne at 7:35pm. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. For starters, though, what are your thoughts on the official cash rate going up? It's half a percentage point, probably have a knock-on effect for the price of your mortgage, and whether the government should kick in with wage subsidies in those cyclone-affected areas. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz, and the email address again, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to Evie, who's got the headlines. Evie, mina pita kōrero.
MPs have butted heads in Parliament over the best way to pay for the cyclone recovery. The government has so far refused to rule out a new tax, saying the responsible thing to do is keep all options on the table. But the opposition has pounced on the government's ambiguity. Nationals leader Christopher Luxon says the latest interest hike, up 50 basis points to 4.75%, will be incredibly worrying for many households. The Reserve Bank says the official cash rate rise is part of the battle against inflation. Mr Luxon says it's a result of the government mismanaging its finances. Raw sewage will be pumped out to sea in Napier for the foreseeable future as the city recovers from Cyclone Gabrielle. Executive Director of City Services, Lance Titter, says the council's wastewater pump stations are working, but the waste isn't being treated. He says the sewer network is operating as it was designed to in an emergency. Meanwhile, power company Unison has warned customers in central Napier to expect brief electricity outages as it works to fix its cyclone-damaged network. The power went off for some customers in central Napier this afternoon. And the $25 million government fund to help farmers recover from Cyclone Gabrielle received more than 30 applications in less than 3 hours today. The Ministry of Primary Industries says applications formally opened at 1:45 this afternoon, and by 4:30 it had received 32 applications. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Northland, there's been a serious crash on Whangarei Heads Road at Tamatero. There may be diversions and delays there, and State Highway 2, Gisborne to Opotiki, has reopened following a slip today south of Matawai. One lane is now open between 7am and 7pm each day between the Whatatutu intersection and Matawai Township. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora rā e ho. Modular homes on vacant Kāinga Ora land could be used to house people displaced by Cyclone Gabrielle. It says it's too early to know exactly how many of its 4,500 houses have been significantly damaged in Tairawhiti, Wairoa and Hawke's Bay. But it won't just be families already in state houses that need new roofs overhead. Others who have lost everything will be joining an already long queue. Kāinga Ora Deputy Chief Executive for Central, Daniel Soughton, explains they haven't been able to assess properties in person yet.
We have people on the ground. Many of them have been impacted personally by this event, but as of Monday, they've been back in their offices, going and reaching out to communities. We've got several based in civil defence centres in case our customers turn up there. We have our 0800 number, which is available for people to call through if they need any support or have had any damage to their properties. And as of Saturday morning, we also started some outbound calling to customers where we could get through, just acknowledging the communications difficulties.
How many of your homes do you think are damaged or uninhabitable right now?
Look, it is early days. We are preparing to do some assessments on those. At this stage, though, it looks like the impacts of the cyclone were greatest in areas where we don't have a lot of housing. So we have a lot of housing in the main urban areas, and they appear to have come through relatively unscathed. That being said, we are very interested to hear from any of our customers who have experienced damage. Please get through to us on our 0800 number.
So do you have any idea of how many houses you're talking about that may have sustained damage? Are you talking tens or are you talking hundreds?
Well, look, we've got about 4,500 properties across that particular region. 200-ish of those, 200 to 300, are in the more rural and remote areas where we know there have been impacts and where we have, the least information at the moment. So those are the ones that we're particularly worried about, and that we'll be targeting our assessments when we can get on the ground safely.
Given that some of them are in more remote areas, I imagine if they are damaged, it's going to be difficult to find replacement housing in the same spot? Is it conceivable that you may have to offer whānau properties outside where they're currently living?
Look, that's obviously a possibility. We'll do everything we can to keep people connected to their communities, understanding that we don't want to disrupt children's schooling, anything like that. We also are working with MB's temporary accommodation service. If there's any way we could bring modular or temporary housing into those communities, we'll do that.
How long do you think it will be before you have a really accurate picture of what you're dealing with?
We're hoping, conditions need to be right. Obviously, there's still an emergency response underway, and we need to be cognisant of first responders and immediate need to get welfare out there. But we're hopeful that if we can get people into the field in the coming weeks, it'll be a few weeks from that point that we've got a really good sense.
So at the moment, you have not visited any of these properties?
No, we have our teams on the ground. Like I said, they have been making visits where they can. I don't have the exact number for you. I can tell you that we've had about 170 calls through to our 0800 number from customers in the area letting us know of maintenance requests. Mostly it's quite minor. So,
like what kind of stuff, Daniel, are they asking for help with?
It's like trees have fallen down, broken windows, leaks in roofs. We haven't heard of any sort of catastrophic events that are making homes uninhabitable at this stage.
Right. What is the demand like for housing in those areas, Hawke's Bay Wide or Tairāwhiti? Normally, if you have to rehouse someone, how big are the waiting lists anyway?
I understand there are about 2,000 on the public housing register across the East North Island.
So to put it in perspective, how difficult would it be to find alternative housing if you need to with some of these whānau?
Look, like I said, we are doing everything we can. We're working with our government partners, including MB and MSD, to bring on additional supply if we can, and that includes on vacant land. I don't think from a public housing perspective and the known impacts that we've got, I don't think we'll be contributing too much to the challenge there based on what we know of our own portfolio. That being said, I know that there are other people who have been impacted who will be made homeless and need temporary support, and we're working very closely with other agencies to see what we can do.
Have you got suitable vacant land right now that you could put modular homes on?
We're looking into that. We have got land, we've got building sites already underway there. We have got other vacant land. So that's part of, as I said, that's part of the thing that we'll be looking at to see if we can bring some of that forward and contribute to the wider effort.
In terms of your whānau that you are housing, do you have much of an idea of how they're doing, how they're managing? What are they telling you?
Well, like I said, we are trying to establish contact with them. Many have not blessedly had not have any impacts from this event. Some have been without food and power and water. So where that's the case, we are connecting them through to MSD and other agencies and the welfare centres so that they can get their immediate needs met. Like I said, thankfully, the extensive damage that has been experienced in some parts of the region seems at this early stage, we seem to have got off quite lightly there. So it's really those immediate welfare needs that we're focused on.
And that was Kāinga Ora Deputy Chief Executive for Central, Daniel Soughton. Now, he's urging anyone in Kāinga Ora homes in the Hawke's Bay or Tairāwhiti region to get in touch by calling 0800 801 601 if they've got any issues. The number again, 0800 801 601. Or you can email emergency recovery, all one word, at kaingaora.gov.nz. We'll put the details on our webpage. Politicians have clashed in Parliament over the best way to pay for the cyclone rebuild, with the government refusing to rule out a new tax. The opposition is accusing Labour of gearing up to break its no new taxes promise, but Labour says it's the responsible thing to keep all options on the table. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Grant Robertson is used to crisis budgets, whether COVID-19 or cost of living. Now add catastrophic cyclone, his spending agenda back to the drawing board.
There's a few things to update on.
The Finance Minister today gave himself a deadline, circle May 18. That is this year's budget day. Any plans for an election year bonanza, though, will need a rethink. The cost of the rebuild will be ridiculous. A bill in the billions.
The scale of the event is clear for everyone to see. It is our largest weather-related disaster this century and arguably bigger than the likes of both Bowler and Giselle in the last century.
And that means an almighty price tag. The exact number is so far unknown, and so too how the government will pay for it. In 2011, Australia introduced a temporary levy to help fund the response to the Queensland floods. The government here won't rule out something similar.
That's not something that we're going to make immediate decisions on today. We're going to assess all of the options that are available.
Labor promised to introduce no new taxes this term. The opposition has pounced on the latest ambiguity, accusing Labor of gearing up to break that promise in a showdown at this year's first question time in Parliament.
You won't rule out smashing Kiwis with a new tax.
We have not taken decisions. We are in exactly the same position of assessing the scale and working out how the government will pay for it. It is what a responsible government would do. It's what Bill English did. Clearly the member's not in that category.
Why won't the minister just rule it out?
Isn't it the case that the Prime Minister has changed, that it's the same old Labor, addicted to spending and just can't get anything done?
The member keeps going on about wanting to get things done. He doesn't seem to have too many ideas about what it is that he actually wants to get done.
There are basically three options available to the government when it comes to picking up the tab: tax more, borrow more or cut other spending. And each option has a different party as cheerleader.
The taxpayer has paid enough. It's appropriate that we borrow for it. We've floated the idea of an excess profits tax.
Any new tax would be a major risk for the government, given the cost pressures already on households. And today's interest rate hike only underscores that. Grant Robertson has 3 months before his budget is due, but another date may focus his mind more. That's October 14, the general election.
Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch reporting there, 7 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai, stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Water is a sought-after resource in Gisborne, where restrictions mean many on town supply are going without showers, and turning the washing machine on is a distant memory. Tairāwhiti Civil Defence says the rationing will be in place for at least another 5 days. Those with tank water are stepping into the void, offering to do a spin and take a load off. Amy Williams and cameraman Samuel Rilstone have the story.
It's been more than a week since Cyclone Gabrielle tore a path through Tairāwhiti, damaging the city's water supply. Looking after her 4 children at home, Jo McKay wanted to do something, anything to help.
I ended up taking some food around and some ice blocks around to a family that had been really affected, and I saw this huge pile of washing that they were trying to dry out to stop it going mouldy. So I said to them, I can do that for you.
It was a welcome offer.
I grabbed this bootload of wet, muddy washing and took it home. And then once I unloaded it and looked at this massive pile, I was like, wow, this is quite daunting. And also, I bet there's actually a lot of people that are in my similar situation that want to be helping but are home-based.
So she put a call out on a local Facebook page, and 25 people offered to do loads of washing with their tank water. Together they've done more than 50 loads.
I set up a tub of water and just was stomping and trying to get as much of the silt and mud out, and it took, the mud permeates all the clothing. It's just phenomenal. I ended up scrubbing all the coat hangers as well because it just goes everywhere.
Ray Puya Brightwell lived in a house that backs onto the river, which is now yellow stickered. They fled to an emergency shelter the night of the cyclone.
We came back at 6 a.m. and half of the house was underwater. I just couldn't imagine what we would have done if we had stayed. We would have been the ones on the roof waiting to be rescued.
Washing, an impossible task. Jo and her volunteers took a load back to their houses. It took 6 people to do all the loads.
In a time of water restriction, it was really hard. You're trying to make the most of the water you had. So when people volunteered to take away some of the clothes, the relief.
She's doing what she can to save precious memories marred by the mud, but neighbours are banding together.
From day one, we had people just turning up with their brooms saying, how can I help? Perfect strangers that you see every day, walking their dogs or going to work, or you wave out to but you've never talked to. And they were all there.
Over the river in Gisborne, Andrew Bryant's house is drying out after being flooded. With so much going on, he's thankful to have clean washing delivered.
I thought that was really awesome, that someone was able to do that out of the kindness of their heart.
And the job's not done. Joe McKay says anyone with tank water at home can reach out to friends and family who need a load taken off.
This feels lovely to be able to return all their clothes washed and folded, and it's just, I think the sense that I got from the families is that we were literally taking a load off their shoulders.
It is the small things, and we'll put the video version of that story on our webpage. 15 haka groups from across the Motu performed today at the long-awaited Te Matatini National Kapa Haka Festival. It was day one for the competition, and there were lots of excited haka fans. And we caught up with one group who performed for the first time on the national stage. Our reporter Pōkere Pāwai spoke to first-timers Te Ringakaha before their debut.
There was excitement in the air at Eden Park as the first group, Muri Whenua from the far north, took the stage this morning. Former champions Whangara Maitawhiti were centre stage soon after. A daunting act to follow for first-timers, Danny Work-based kapa Te Ringakaha. I spoke to a few members of Te Ringakaha prior to their performance to gauge the mood.
Very nervous but excited.
He kaka. He kaka. Wiri wiri.
I'm pretty nervous, It's my first time. Uncle's ready to tear that stage up.
I'm feeling a little bit nervous actually. Feeling nervous and feeling excited. I can't wait.
As they came off stage, there were tears and smiles. Their kaitata ki tāne, Wharemako Paiwai, was exhausted.
I'm happy. E kore a muri e hoki so we done it. We did what we set out to do, and now I'm just happy to just spend time off the floor with the whānau and just have a good vibe for the rest of the Matatini. It's only our first one, and it's not going to be our last.
Now the job and the hard work is done. He is looking forward to having some fun and watching other groups perform.
Just got to enjoy it. Ka mahi a te mahi. Nāne ka riro ai ngā hua.
Over the course of the day, thousands of fans flocked to Eden Park, and everyone has a favourite group. What kapa are you rooting for today?
Te Paumanga Tāwhiri, Kaka, TPM, TPM.
My favourite would probably be Whangara Maitawhiti or Wakahuia.
Some fans didn't know which groups they were cheering for. They were just here to cheer for their friends.
Just here supporting one of the boys. He's performing for one of the Kapaka groups.
Thousands more fans are expected for day 2 tomorrow, with defending champion group Ngā Tūmanako performing.
Quick bit of feedback on the ferry cancellations. This person says that Kiwi Rail's painting a rosy picture of rebooking people. They got a text that told them their ticket had been cancelled and there was no alternative sailings. They've made a new booking for March 17th. Others want to be able to cancel and get credits by doing it all online.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr says banks must talk about what services they maintain for customers in regional areas like cyclone-hit Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. He was questioned about the failure of EFTPOS and bank ATM machines after the electricity supply collapsed in the floods. Adrian Orr says banks need to look at the issue.
There's nothing more distressing than seeing a cafe serving hot coffee beside a bank whose ATM doesn't work. One had a generator. And so it's these lessons around resilience. Operational risk is as important as financial risk, reputational risk. And these are the conversations that I believe have been too lacking.
Adrian Orr was speaking today after raising the official cash rate by 50 basis points to 4.75% in response to persistent inflation. Gisborne households and businesses will be able to dispose of piles of silt on their properties tomorrow, with 2 dumps set up. Tairāwhiti Civil Defence says rural industry properties can take silt to the Matokitoki, Cleanfill and Quarry. Residents can take silt to the end of Dunstan Road. The Gisborne Waste Management Transfer Stations is full and closed to the public, as are the Tokomaru Bay and Tolaga Bay transfer stations. However, in Napier, the City Council is still identifying locations that are suitable for silt disposal and storage. The Ministry of Social Development says just over $20 million in civil defence payments have been paid to nearly 35,000 people affected by flooding in Auckland. Regional Public Service Commissioner for Tāmaki Makaurau, Julia Lynch, says people should get in touch with what they need and to find out what support can be given.
The civil defence payments can be used for help with emergency food, bedding, clothing, loss of income and costs if you have to leave your home. It also covers payments if you have evacuees staying with you.
Civil defence payments are available to people in a range of regions affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. Some rural settlements in the northwestern part of Auckland have been cut off from power and internet for 10 days, with little official assistance. Rodney District Local Board member Mark Dennis says for some communities in South Head, Parakai, Helensville and Kaukapakapa, help has only just arrived. He says these communities originally expected civil defence to show up, but he says they've had to fend for themselves, setting up their own centres and relying on local volunteers. A Gloria Vale woman believes allegations of sexual harassment at the West Coast commune have been exaggerated. 6 former women of the Christian community are seeking a ruling that they were employees, not volunteers. Their testimonies have unveiled claims of sexual abuse and arduous working conditions, which Gloria Vale's leaders have denied. Giving evidence to the employment court in Greymouth, Christiana Stantrew said she didn't experience any abuse.
Nobody ever grabbed my bum or did anything else so explicit, and I never saw any bum grabbing happen to anyone else. I did get hugged often, and this has never bothered me at all. I often offer hugs myself, as I'm an affectionate person.
Christiana Stantrew says Gloria Vale leaders have developed a better understanding around consent for hugging and touching. Inter-Islanders management says the public can have confidence in its fleet despite recent mechanical failures. The Kaiarahi has resumed sailings this afternoon after a fault picked up on Monday resulted in cancellations for about 2,500 passengers. The Kaitaki continues to be freight only after its engines stopped last month. General Manager Walter Rushbrook has told Checkpoint the Inter-Islander is focused on running a safe and reliable service.
We have had some bumps on the road, which we're really apologetic about over the last couple of weeks, and that's a combination of our ships, but also we had that cyclone and other weather disruption. So when a few things compound together, it makes things a bit tougher. But look, we're working as hard as we can behind the scenes to make sure that we get back to normal as quickly as possible.
Walter Rushbrook says he expects it'll take 3 or 4 days to clear the backlog. And kapahaka groups from cyclone-affected areas say their matatini is exactly what they need right now. The first day of the Kapahaka Festival began in Tāmaki Makaurau's Eden Park this morning, following a welcome pōwhiri yesterday. Their matatini Chief Operating Officer, Wee Pere, says teams from Northland, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay were all consulted ahead of the festival.
There were some challenges for some of those teams, particularly in Kauhungunu, Tairāwhiti and Te Taitokiro. The National Board sat down and through the regional delegates were able to reach out to every one of those teams, and all of them had feedback that they wanted to attend. So we ensured that we did everything possible to get them here.
Wee Pere says it's been absolutely amazing to see performances get underway today after a 4-year hiatus. That's the news.
Tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, historian Grant Morris on the history of flooding on the East Coast, beginning with the Clive flood of 1897 and the big floods in 1938, which also disproportionately affected the Esk Valley. In our series on New Zealand sports history, my guest is Wayne Smith, talking about the many memorable matches that have defined his incredible career. That's on afternoons from 1 p.m. tomorrow on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland south to Taranaki, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Isolated showers becoming widespread for a time tomorrow. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow morning or afternoon, some possibly heavy. For Whanganui and from Taihape to Wellington, isolated showers turning to rain tonight before easing or clearing tomorrow. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, excluding the Kaikoura coast. A few showers this evening. Fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers. For the Kaikoura coast and for Canterbury, periods of rain with heavy falls, mainly inland. For Westland, scattered showers clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, fine about the fjords. Showers elsewhere becoming frequent tomorrow morning, then easing or clearing tomorrow evening. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow morning. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Aucklanders forbidden from entering their properties may still need to pay their rates bill due on Tuesday. While some other councils affected by Cyclone Gabrielle have opted to provide rates remission for red-stickered homeowners, Auckland Council has chosen not to, instead requiring affected people to apply for assistance. For some residents, it's a frustrating and costly hurdle. Tom Taylor explains.
Next week, Julie Armstrong faces a rates bill of almost $750, despite the fact she hasn't stepped foot in her house in almost a month. When Auckland flooded at the end of January, water streamed through her Northcote Point property, causing a slip. She hasn't even been able to return to check out the extent of the damage.
As soon as the slip occurred, we had to evacuate. So we don't really know.
Since then, her family spent a week at an Airbnb for $2,300 before locking in a rental with a bond of 6 weeks' rent. Although insurance covers some of the cost of moving around, it comes with a heavy excess of $1,000. On top of this, Ms. Armstrong's had to pay to replace essentials, like clothing, left behind in their rush to evacuate. Now, her upcoming rates bill could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
To me, it's completely unreasonable. You've decided that I have to leave my house. I haven't decided that. You're blocking me from it and telling me it's illegal to enter it and get my own things that I own and I pay for. You're also blocking insurance, because it's the council who controls it, from being able to assess the damage and therefore pay me any money. So you're making it impossible for me to get money to live, and then saying I have to pay you money for nothing in return.
Head of Rates Valuations at Auckland Council, Ronwyn Heath, says rather than rates remissions, the council will support people through grants. She says the council's emergency relief fund caters not only to property owners, but also tenants. Residents can make applications through the council website or over the phone, though the latter option draws a laugh from Miss Armstrong.
Have you ever tried calling the council? For the love of God. I'll be on hold for 6.5 hours.
Since Auckland's flooding and Cyclone Gabrielle, the Citizens Advice Bureau has been inundated with queries about where to access help. Deputy Chief Executive Andrew Hubbard says the organisation is expecting a surge in rates-related queries and says the approach varies from council to council. But he says Thames Coromandel District Council's decision to automatically provide remission for people with red-stickered houses should serve as an example to the rest.
It's one less thing, one less hassle for people already undergoing very stressful situations. They don't have to go through what can be a complex application process for a remission.
In Napier, the council's investment and funding manager, Gary Rushdinsky, says they'll be looking to provide targeted rates relief. He says it's something the council worked through after COVID and the Napier floods of 2020.
The first time around, we created a new clause within our remissions policy, effectively our rates refund policy. Effectively, it's just a response to what we call significant extraordinary circumstances, and it's a bit of a cover-all. And so within that, it allows council fairly sweeping powers to be able to provide targeted rates relief to people that have been impacted.
Napier City Council meets tomorrow to discuss whether to give affected residents a rates remission.
Ports of Auckland has turned a profit, but will it be enough to keep one of its fiercest critics happy? The underlying profit of almost $21 million for the 6 months to the end of December means a $15 million dividend payout to its owner, Auckland Council. Mayor Wayne Brown's been highly critical of the port's performance and has suggested selling the council's shares to slash debt. He also wants the waterfront car terminal gone and the prime land returned to Aucklanders to use. Ports of Auckland CEO Roger Gray says he's been having frank conversations with the Mayor.
I spoke with the Mayor yesterday and certainly he acknowledged that we are on the journey to returning a good return to the people of Auckland. There's a lot more to do, but he acknowledged that he was, as he said to me, you can't complain about making more money.
He wants 2 times plus that though, doesn't he?
And certainly we are committed to continuing to grow the profitability of the business. Next year we've agreed with Council to hit $52 million net profit after tax, and that's $10 million up on what we initially thought we could get to as our way of contributing to the $295 million budget hole.
So $15 million dividend back to the council. I mean, how have you managed to do what you have done so far?
It's been a combination of things. I mean, really it's about focusing on the core of the business and getting back to basics. One of the big turnarounds has been the container terminal and getting volume back through there. Once the board made a decision to end automation, we've been able to focus on restaffing it, getting volume back, satisfying our customers and delivering. And pleasingly, we've also had the return of crews, which is contributing to our numbers.
So manual is more productive than automation?
It certainly is proving to be more productive than the automation that we were trying to launch, yes. I wouldn't sit here and say this or that, but yep, we've increased our number of staff by about 80. We've instituted training programs and we're starting to deliver. We're putting through about 3,000 containers a week more than we were when I arrived.
What is Cyclone Gabrielle? What effect is that having on the port freight deliveries?
Yeah, none for us. We closed for 3 days. Because of the fact that the winds were so high and it wasn't safe to operate. But once the winds dropped, we were back up and running and we had a very strong back half of last week. So we're not actually seeing much impact at all for Auckland. And one of the interesting and unique features about Auckland is we're very sheltered behind the outer islands, which makes the port in those sort of bad weather actually quite protected.
In terms of trucks turning up on time, though, is all of that running smoothly? People being able to pick up and drop off?
Yeah, largely the Auckland network's back and running and ticking away. So we've not seen a huge disruption. There was some disruption on rail, but that seems now to be sorted out and we're back and running business as usual.
Roger, the Mayor wants you to get the cars off the wharf and return the waterfront to Aucklanders for their use. So how are you going with that?
Well, we're waiting to start to work with the Mayor on that. He's decided to take leadership of that initiative along with Minister Wood and Eki Panuku. So we're going to sit down with them and work through what's the best outcome and return of port land to community use. Lisa, one of the interesting things which I don't think a lot of people appreciate is that over the last 25 years, the port has handed back in excess of 125 hectares of land. We used to go all the way round to and including ownership of the West Haven Marina, and we've progressively handed that back. And so there's no reluctance from us to look and find a managed way to further return land to the people.
So how long before the cars are gone then?
Well, it may not be the cars going. We're going to obviously work through that. It might be other areas. So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet on working through what's the best and most viable plan for Auckland, for the port, and also for the community.
You must have some ideas though, Roger. If it's not the cars, what will it be?
Well, I think it'd be a little unfair before we sit down and actually have the discussions to work through that. But I do think there will be opportunities in the medium term to look to further consolidate and return some of the land, additional land to the people.
Okay, so I appreciate you don't want to tell our listeners ahead of speaking to the Mayor, but I suppose what I'm really asking you is, do you have a proposal, a solid proposal that you are going to him and the council with?
No, not at this stage. We're going to work in collaboration with them to develop a proposal.
So how many generations will have to wait to get that waterfront back?
I'm not sure that, as I said to you, over the last 25 years or one generation, we've handed back 125 hectares. So, as I said, there's no reluctance. I think it'll happen progressively. One of the challenges is the New Zealand supply chain is a network. And if product or trades leave here, we've got to find somewhere for them to go. And right now, that's not actually available. So we have to work in conjunction with central government, council, other jurisdictions to work through where best would those trades go if they left here.
Hey, just curious, how is your relationship with Mayor Brown? Because there was a bit of back and forth there, open letters and expectations.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like working with Mayor Brown. He's direct. You're never left wondering what his view is on something. And as an Australian who's migrated here, I like that frankness. So I think it'd be fair to say that Mayor Brown and I have an open and forthright conversations, and I respect that in him.
So you're frank back?
I can be when it needs to be, yes.
And that's Ports of Auckland CEO Roger Gray. It is 16 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The head of Australia's spy agency has outlined how journalists, military veterans and judicial figures are being targeted by foreign espionage agencies at unprecedented levels. He says Australia faces an unprecedented assault from foreign spies. The ABC's Andrew Green has more.
Please welcome Mike Burgess.
Before an audience of military chiefs, diplomats, security officials and academics, the ASIO Director-General delivers his fourth annual threat assessment, the first since last year's federal election.
More Australians are being targeted for espionage or foreign interference than at any time in Australia's history. More hostile foreign intelligence services, more spies, more targeting, more harm, more ASIO investigations, more ASIO disruptions. And from where I sit, it feels like hand-to-hand combat.
Speaking inside ASIO's Canberra headquarters, Mike Burgess has revealed his agency in the past year disrupted what he describes as a hive of spies. The undeclared operatives of a foreign power had recruited local proxies and agents in an attempt to steal sensitive Australian information.
It's obvious to us the spies were highly trained because they used sophisticated tradecraft to disguise their activities. They were good, but ASIO was better.
With details of the AUKUS submarine program to be revealed within weeks, the ASIO boss has warned defence secrets are being particularly targeted by foreign espionage agencies. Last year, Defence Minister Richard Marles ordered an investigation into reports China had tried to recruit Australian pilots to help train its Air Force. Mike Burgess confirms ASIO and its international partners have blocked some former ADF personnel from working for authoritarian regimes.
These individuals are lackeys, more top tools than top guns. Selling our warfighting skills is no different to selling our secrets, especially when the training and tactics are being transferred to countries that will use them to close capability gaps and could use them against us or our allies sometime in the future.
The domestic intelligence chief warns journalists and judicial figures are also being targeted by spies, but claims he's been directly pressured by some public servants, academics and business identities to ease up on ASIO's operations.
I'm concerned there are senior people in this country who appear to believe that espionage and foreign interference is no big deal. It's something that can be tolerated or somehow ignored or safely managed.
The ASIO Director-General ended his annual threat assessment with a boast that some foreign spies are now complaining it's too hard to do business in Australia.
One spy whinged to a colleague, "I picked the wrong posting. The security service makes this one impossible. Our adversaries might not like us, but they fear us and they definitely respect us. As Director-General Security, I can certainly live with that."
Two world leaders are sharpening their vitriol for the other as a deluded Vladimir Putin blames Joe Biden and Western nations for turning Ukraine into a so-called neo-Nazi regime. President Biden is fresh from a visit to Kiev where he praised Western democracy for standing up to Russian aggression. Moscow is also suspending its participation in its only remaining nuclear arms agreement with Washington. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg has more.
The world, according to Vladimir Putin, feels like a parallel universe. Who started the war in Ukraine? not Russia, he says.
Responsibility for fueling the Ukrainian conflict, for its escalation, and for the growing number of victims lies fully with the West, and of course with the regime in Kyiv. I wish to repeat, they started the war. We are using force to stop it.
But it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. Western military aid has helped Kyiv resist. It hasn't forced the Kremlin, though, to de-escalate. Today, President Putin suspended Russia's participation in the last remaining nuclear arms control treaty with America, an agreement that limits nuclear arsenals and enabled missile inspections.
We know that the West has directly helped Kyiv to launch strikes on air bases where our strategic nuclear bombers are located. Now they want to carry out inspections of our military sites. In light of today's confrontation, that is absurd.
It's a bad sign. In order to avoid nuclear war, it's better to have a framework. But losing this framework, we are witnessing the real threat of a nuclear war.
Washington says the Kremlin's decision to halt participation in the nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. The BBC wasn't allowed to attend the Kremlin leader's big speech. Journalists from what Russia calls unfriendly countries were not sent an invitation. But after watching President Putin on TV, this is what struck me most about him. His special military operation has not gone at all according to plan. But regret, there was no hint of that, and no sign at all that Putin is looking for an off-ramp. Instead of compromise, he favours confrontation. And this audience loved it. Mind you, the president here was preaching to the converted. All main Russian TV channels carried the speech live. From these images alone, you'd never know things had gone badly wrong for Russia on the battlefield.
Russia will respond to any challenge we face, because we are one country, one people. We believe in ourselves, in our strength. Truth is on our side.
After 1 year of war, the Kremlin is still managing to persuade most Russians to believe that.
Southern Turkey continues to be shaken by tremors 2 weeks after a massive quake killed almost 50,000 people in the country and more in neighbouring Syria. The death toll from the latest aftershocks has risen to 6, and even more homes are damaged and destroyed. For many, it feels like the apocalypse. The BBC's Anna Foster has this update.
They felt it, and they knew. The ground heaved and twisted. The lights went out. Another powerful quake 2 weeks after the first. The fear is still fresh and raw. Across southern Turkey and northwest Syria, people wondered if they'd survive again.
I was in front of the building. The road moved like waves. The building was moving, the cars were going from left to right. We felt the first earthquake, and this one was even worse.
It was really scary. I'd never experienced such a strong earthquake. I came to Hatay as a volunteer to help earthquake victims. It made me understand their mental state because it was a really scary moment.
For many, the first thought was protecting their families. They gathered up everything that was precious to them and ran.
This volleyball court was set up as a relief centre after the first earthquake, and by yesterday it was almost deserted. But when people felt the ground shake under their feet again last night, they fled back here looking for a place of safety.
Phyllis and her sister are homeless now, holding her nephews tight. She doesn't know what's next.
I'm concerned for our future. I'm afraid for our children. I don't want them to be orphans. Mentally, I'm upside down. I hope good things will happen. We're in a miserable situation, running here and there with so little belongings with us.
The The recovery effort is already huge. Adana's mayor came here to try and offer reassurance.
People filled this place up, and thousands are on the streets again. It's our job to erect them tents, provide them blankets and food.
Now there are fresh images of loss and grief. Millions of people, desperately trying to heal, have been traumatised again. In Syria and here in Turkey, there seems no end to the agony.
Experts say North Korea is experiencing a critical food crisis made worse by border restrictions, bad weather and sanctions. The Pyongyang remains obsessed with showing strength and showing its military might. CNN's Will Ripley has more on the country's aggressive actions.
The massive missile is a menacing sight, moving into place at Pyongyang's airport. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gave the order just hours ahead of Saturday's surprise launch, state media says. This intercontinental ballistic missile, a Hwasong-15, hitting hypersonic speeds, hurtling high above the Earth, barreling back down to Japan's territorial waters about 67 minutes later. Saturday's missile, one of many on display just last week. A record number of ICBMs, more than any military parade in North Korean history. Kim ordered mass production of ICBMs earlier this year. The parade featuring new missiles and a new face. Kim Ju-ae, Kim's daughter, believed to be just 9 years old. She began appearing on state media 3 months ago, fueling speculation she's being groomed as the next North Korean leader. So, given the fact that Kim Jong-un chose to introduce his daughter on the day of his previous ICBM launch, what do you make of the timing and symbolism of that?
I think it demonstrates that she's being groomed as the next leader, and that to me suggests there could be something behind the scenes, maybe a health problem with Kim Jong-un that is accelerating a need to do this now rather than years later when she's a bit older.
Kim's daughter, now a fixture on state media, sitting with her father at a weekend soccer match, posing together for a postage stamp, dad, daughter, and the family arsenal. 2 smaller missiles fired Monday, a test of tactical nuclear weapons, state TV says. The bellicose broadcast came with a warning from Kim's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, saying the frequency of using the Pacific Ocean as our shooting range depends on the nature of the U.S. military's actions. She's referring to upcoming military drills on the Korean Peninsula. The U.S., South Korea, and Japan responding to the ICBM launch with joint air exercises over the weekend, fueling fears of further escalation.
Now turning to potty talk, the remains of what could be the world's oldest flushing toilet have been found in China, but the question of whether it was for sitting or squatting remains a mystery. The BBC's Baldeep Chahal has the story.
During excavations of ancient palace ruins in the central city of Xi'an in the summer, archaeologists unearthed broken parts of the old toilet as well as a bent flush pipe. In their report, researchers say it could be 2,400 years old. If true, that would make it the oldest flushing toilet ever found. But what they can't say is whether users sat on a seat or squatted over it, because the top part is missing. Prior to this discovery, the invention of the first flushing toilet was widely credited to English courtier John Harrington, who supposedly installed one for Queen Elizabeth in the 16th century. Though 4,000-year-old drainage systems that might have been connected with toilets have been found in northwest India. The recent find is part of a broader effort to understand ancient Chinese dynasties, including how people lived and how their cities were constructed. Archaeologists are now analysing soil samples collected from the toilets in the hope of finding out what people ate during that time.
Well, that is all we've got time for this evening. The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. And ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. Tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up gets first access to the beachside community of Karikari, where 16 slips keep locals without power, fuel and fresh food since Cyclone Gabrielle 9 days ago. That's on First Up. Do tune in 5 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be back a little later. RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Mayor of Wellington, Tory Whanau, says a spate of mechanical problems with Cook Strait ferries is the legacy of years of underinvestment. Thousands of passengers were left stranded in Picton and Wellington after both Bluebridge and the Inter-Islander suffered problems. Trade Minister Damien O'Connor flies to Tokyo tomorrow to discuss the Trans-Pacific trade deal. New Zealand is this year's chair of the Comprehensive and Progressive